Greetings. I'm Dr. Sandra Lewis, founder of the American College of Cardiology Mid-Career Women's Leadership Institute, Finding Your Next. Through this program, mid-career women in cardiology spend 2 years building leadership skills and confidence to soar at a time in their lives when they recognize they have increasing time and energy to direct their professional growth. But there really is a paucity of opportunities which seem to focus on the trainees and early career physicians, but not much for this group of women when they have the time to move forward. The opportunities are as vast as the creativity of these amazing women. As part of our program, we're creating an archive of webinars with leadership messaging from key thought leaders from our community and the world. This will be an enduring resource for our community. We're thankful to Novartis Pharmaceuticals for generous support of this programming. And so, we invite you to today's webinar with Dr. Athena Poppas. Dr. Poppas is Chief of Cardiology and Professor of Medicine at the Alpert Medical School of Brown University. Dr. Poppas, Athena, I'm so glad to have you here today as we learn of your leadership path and maybe your next.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Sandy. What a great idea to do this. So thank you.
So the first time I met you, we were in Washington, D.C. It was 2004 or 2005. It was at a Board of Governors meeting, a meeting where individual state-elected cardiology leaders gather to share on a national level. I was filling in for the Oregon governor, and you were the governor of the ACC Rhode Island chapter. And I remember it so clearly. You seemed to be the only woman governor in the room. And I remember looking at you and thinking, wow, how does she do it? Can you take us back to that time? What was it like being one of the only women in the room?
Well, that's a very kind thing to say, Sandy. I do remember meeting you. It was great. I don't know that I was the only woman, but I think we've all been in situations where you walk in and you think, oh, interesting. You look around the room and is there somebody like me? I think people of color notice that as well. It certainly happens in lots of different places. It happens at work sometimes. It happens even in social settings, probably less so. And I think it gives you a little bit of pause, but I think I usually walk in and say, huh, that's odd. And then just forge ahead because, we've been training with mixed genders and it doesn't seem like it should get in the way. And so I don't unless somebody says something. I think I and probably others, you just sort of go in and you do your job. Otherwise, you get a little taken aback by that. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming. I would say to me, I'm a visual person. So you walk in a room and you're wearing bright green, bright red dress, and all the guys are in dark suits. So you do feel like you stand out a little bit. But beyond that, I think you just go in and do your job. I don't know. How did you feel when you were there?
I put my blinders on. I just, and actually, one of the lessons that somebody along the way said is take that as a power, that it's a strength, not a weakness. I try to do that. That's not always possible. What do you think was your leadership superpower back then?
Maybe it was that, and I didn't know it because I didn't really. Well, for starters, I didn't think I had any superpowers. I felt like I was just swimming and trying to keep up, like most of us. I think, like a lot of our training, you sort of put your head down and you do the work. You're on call all night, you're taking care of patients. I think some of that translates into some of these other venues where you think, well, I'm here to do this job. I'm going to put my head down and do that work. I like your sort of visual of the blinders of not being distracted by the noise or the visual, distractors in the room. I think being clear about what you're saying. I think I also learned to not hold back when I make a statement. Well, just like Bill said, or I was thinking, but I'm not sure, but to just make the statement. To speak when I had a good thing to say, but not to try to overspeak. I didn't think that much about it, but I think being clear, being direct, being open, being a good listener. And so I think some of those could be superpowers.
Has your leadership style changed since then?
Oh, for sure. I hope we all change over time. I think as I've learned things, Olivia may remember, but years ago with the WIC group, when we saw that there weren't women in leadership, we said, well, let's give them the skills to get there then. And we started to have some professional development conferences. And I learned a lot from that. And I also learned that outside of medicine, there's a lot of work being done in that. And so I picked up pieces from lots of different people along the way. And also, I think friends that were in other areas, lawyers, finance, business, where they also might have been the only woman in the room. And how did they adapt? Some of the things in like HBR leadership courses. So I think I definitely learned along the way. Somebody once said, I probably learned that as you became a leader, you had to be more flexible, not less. That really kind of bummed me out. But I think it's totally true. And kind of leaning into that, I think, helped me.
It's very interesting that you say that, because as we started this program and we talk about it, every other group that has professional women, they say, we want that program. We need that program. And in fact, it was sort of the impetus for some of the sponsorship that we've had for moving forward.
Can I say something about that? Because
Of
I think
course.
something you mentioned early on in your whole genesis around this, which is really brilliant, because we think about the beginning, right? Like I interview a lot of people for they're coming out of fellowship, and there's these major transitions, and then nobody thinks about it until the end. It's like there's this 30-year gap, and you're just supposed to kind of keep moving along. But I think this is really important to sort of recognize that there's places along the way to sort of stop and pause and think where you're going. So I'm glad that you're doing this. It's important. Somebody once asked me to be a mentor maybe 10 years in, and I remember thinking, what are you talking about? Who's helping me? I'm not ready to help anybody else. So it's great. It's helpful.
Thank you. These women are soaring. It's given me a lot more than we've given to it. You've been a chief of cardiology. That is in itself just such an awesome thing. Almost a decade now. It's a huge accomplishment, especially you're really one of the few women in that role in the cardiology world. In fact, I was talking to a woman from Rush over the weekend who's now a new chief of cardiology, and she was talking about reaching out to you and to Nicole, and so, what are there, 8 or 9 of you?
Something like that. It certainly changes over time. There might be more. It's hard to keep track because you've got to join a group to know for sure. But
tell me a little bit more about that role and how it came about.
Sure. Like a lot of things for me, it was serendipity. So I'm not a great person if you're supposed to have a path and follow it. I get passionate about things and interested in things, and maybe I then do well in that role, or I get interested in administration as I learn about it. And so the position sort of came about. I was the vice chief and then vice chair. Vice chief. And when the position actually for vice chief, I thought, well, I can do that. I started to realize that I liked doing some of that system work, and sort of was at a position to pay it forward and mentor the next generation, and work on the clinical ops, because I really appreciated that side. And so stepped into it. It wasn't something I was necessarily thinking about. I think as I did more of the administrative work, I thought, oh, I find this interesting. I leaned into it, realized I liked fixing problems. Obviously did a pretty good job, and somebody thought, oh, she could probably do the next job. But there were bumps. I think people thought I hadn't written an R01 grant. So what would that mean? How would I answer that? So I said, well, I'll hire a vice chief of research who's done a lot of that, which actually has been phenomenal because they're experts at that. So I think it was serendipity. I think it was working well in a job and being recognized for that. I think it's finding new things that were interesting. And so as I learned about how to be a leader, and when I took on the vice chief role, actually the dyads have been tremendous. So I learned as much from them as anyone else. So a shout out there for sure. Hattie Richard was a VP who gave me a book about what to do in your first 90 days, I think. It was a manager's book, which was really helpful. And she was really a good mentor. So in the space of medicine, but in the business side. So she really helped me understand how to navigate that and learn to, be passionate about things. You can't win all the time. And I think it was a hard transition, to move clinically to administration. People talk a lot about that. But you want to be right 99% of the time in clinical medicine, and that's just not going to be the case in administration. So I got a lot of outside help, I think, as I reflect on that.
The dyad is a really powerful part of our work, and not one that we are always looking for. That's really an important point there. What about the women in our group who have this goal for themselves? They'd like to become chief. What advice would you give them? What are some steps they should take to get there?
First, I'd ask them why they want to do that. And be sure it's for the right reasons for any goal that you have, right? Do you want to do it because you like a title and think you'll be able to do things? Or do you want to find out the why? Do you want to really shape things? Do you want to grow programs? Are you passionate about that? I'm caution people about doing things for the title because you don't get as much as you want from a title. And you can have a lot of influence without a title. So I think the first step would be to be sure you know why and think deeply about that, because that actually helps set up the steps for how you're going to get there. If you're passionate about it, then follow that up. So get involved in your operations group, get involved in the administrative promotions process. So what are the components that a chief needs to be comfortable? Learn about the budgeting process. Work in helping on that side. So leading an area. So I was the director of the Echo Lab because I love echo and was passionate about it. And I learned a lot in that space. And so then you can apply those to sort of the next. So finding things that you're passionate about and then doing them really well, learning a lot in that space from people around you. Again, as I said, I learned good and bad from dyads, but those dyad partnerships are important. People outside of your realm for sure. And then connecting with people in the system. So if you think you're going to be a leader in your health system or maybe outside, sometimes you have to leave for people to appreciate you, what that looks like in different places. So there's ways to sort of learn about that, learn about your institution, even talk with your chief or chair and expressing that interest. Some of the people that took on leadership roles had applied for other roles. And I thought, wow, they're pretty junior, but they're clearly interested in that. And I'm going to help develop that. So I would say those are a couple of things, but even telling the people who are those leaders, these are things that I'm interested in. How can I get involved and how can I help now and build up sort of a portfolio of things and knowledge? And so lean in and learn those things.
So if we move from Brown and Rhode Island, you've held numerous leadership roles at the ACC, from the Board of Trustees, chairing the annual scientific sessions, women in you not only leading the women in cardiology section, but you and Minnow really started it. And then as ACC President from 2020 to 2021. Once again, you were a trailblazer, the fourth woman to ever hold that role. But as we both remember, your presidency was anything but typical. It was during that major global crisis. And instead of a typical presidency where you travel and meet so many of our wonderful ACC members face to face around the world, you had to lead us all during a time of uncertainty and crisis from behind a screen. What was that like for you? Did you ever feel like you missed out or wish you could have a do-over?
Boy, a lot to say on that space. It was a really hard and dark time when we think about it, about the COVID pandemic, right? So I think every person missed out on something in that space, right? Somebody wrote about comparative grief during that time. Somebody must have it worse than me. But we all had a bit of a loss of something we didn't do. I mean, people didn't get to go to their proms, right? So there was not that, but that's an emotional thing, or they didn't have graduations in person. So there's a lot that was lost in addition to lives, right? So it puts it in perspective. I would also say a couple things, and sometimes it's easier in retrospect, right? That you learn more when you're tested, when things are hard, than when it's easy. It's super easy to be cheap when you're kind of coasting or to lead something when it's easy. But if you're changing things and it's a hard time, um, leading governance when we were changing things was hard. You learn more and you grow a lot more. It sure is a lot harder. And you feel like, I didn't sign up for this. But man, you really come out, I think, better, hopefully. Not all stress should, shouldn't all have to go through stress or, long backpacking hikes to become a better person. But I think there's that I felt like I grew and learned a lot more. There's no doubt that it was hard because for me, though I have a great team here at Brown, and I knew that we built that both for succession planning and that when I'm not around, that not physically present, that they would be able to do a lot of the work. And but at the same time, that we were dealing with, financial crisis at ACC and changing the meetings and everything, and how do we help our members and the Tiger teams that Brendan and Rumsfeld built to get information out to people and publications. There was just a lot of stuff going on. So all those things were happening quickly, but at the same time, we had day-to-day crises here, how we're going to staff the units. So that I think that was, and there was family challenge, right? Like my whole family was home, and my youngest son has autism, so he didn't have the outlets that he needed. So he was stressed. So that was probably the harder thing, if it was one of those things, but it was every aspect was going through pretty tremendous stress. So do I feel like I missed out? It's funny, a lot of people have asked about the travel piece. I traveled before, and I hope people don't think that being president's about travel. It's about meeting people, connecting, but leading the group of members. And so it helped for me to make it a little more clear about, to your point, the why, and how you deliver that. We're going to talk about the why and the how and the what. Sort of mattered less. So I got pretty good at these kind of recordings.
Oh, I remember some of the political challenges that you and I dealt with, and what a great leader you were through our challenges.
Crazy.
It was really it was a strange time. I'm sure most of us have some PTSD from it.
Right. But there's strange times now. There's certainly stressors now. I think the magnitude or the area is different, perhaps. But dealing with those and hopefully dealing with them well for members and finding the balance. There's never a perfect answer to some of the problems that come up, but also like anything that we're doing, we're leading, when a lot of the leadership positions you had, it's the crisis come up. But if you just deal with the crises, you can't sort of focus on the long-term goals. So being able to balance the near term and the long term, I think, is an important thing I learned about that as well.
Yeah, and your leadership through that was really important in doing just that. Hanging in there, taking a deep breath, and moving ahead. So you mentioned your mom, and I read that your mom was quite the trailblazer in her own right. Tell me a little more about her and the kind of influence she had on your journey as a leader. I actually started out as a journalist.
You did?
Thought I wanted to be. Actually, it was the best training for being a doctor. Learning how to take a history and write it up, it was a piece of cake.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I can see that for sure. And I can see it in your daughter then, obviously. So my mother is amazing. I think only in retrospect do I sort of see that I took a lot of modeling from her, as a young person. As she had said, you're a lot like me. And as a rebellious teenager, I thought that was a terrible thing, but only later sort of recognized what a compliment that was. She, in the 50s, went to journalism school when she was supposed to be a teacher. And then when she graduated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the Journal, they told her she could cover the society pages because politics was too dangerous. I know it's dangerous. So I think what I learned from her is she said, okay, I'll just go around. And so she went and moved to Europe. It was just post World War II, and did writing and PR work. She worked as a journalist and worked in PR, actually for the Army briefly. Met my father there on a train. That's another great story. But I think she ran into roadblocks in the 50s and went around them. And when she came back, she worked in PR for Manpower. So it was one of the first women to hold an exec position in a Fortune 500 company, and was told that she wouldn't get a bonus because she had a husband. And that was just okay. And she said, no, it wasn't okay. So she was constantly, and that was things I didn't hear about until later. She just would go around and say no, but put her head down and do the work. So maybe that's where I learned some of that. And then growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, Janesville, she was one of the few moms that worked, and heard from friends later on that was really something that other moms and she and other girls could see as some option other than, not that being a homemaker is negative, but that there were other choices. But she also did it in this sort of quiet way. She would have dinner. We would have dinner together. We're going to talk about children, but we were feral, I think they would say now. We just did our thing, which was great. But she led in this quiet, strong way and continued to do so as a journalist later. She died young, actually, from heart disease in her late 60s, but made a strong impression of mentoring people and being unwavering in her convictions. And so I think, I hope I'm like her. So
She sounds like an amazing person. I wish I would have known her. I'm sure she's very proud of you.
thank you.
One of the women in our current cohort recently said something that really struck me. You just mentioned children. She said that the children of physicians are tough and resilient. What's your take on that? I remember you describing this in an earlier interview as raising your kids was like a teeter-totter. How did you balance your professional life with raising your kids?
A lot there. So we said we shouldn't say balance because that assumes that exists, right? The teeter-totter is probably a better way than balance. Like, does it really ever get just like that? I don't think so. Are they more resilient? One, I don't know who said that, but maybe that makes us feel a little better.
Oh, man.
That might be part of it. That's the guilt we should lose. Like, some men, I'm glad to see some men worry about that, because it shouldn't be gender related. It should be family related. I think, and it's probably outside of medicine, right? So women that are working, that their children have to be more self-reliant. Probably doesn't matter if your mother's a housekeeper or she's the CEO of a company. They probably have different supports, but they have to be independent. So maybe it's more a comment on being forced to allow your children to be more independent rather than feel like my, Ivy League education is to manage my children and hover over them. So there's probably good that comes from that as well. But there's certainly some good to having children, live feral lives and make mistakes on their own at a young age.
Yeah, it's something that that I wonder if these tiger moms are kind of taking the learning out of their children a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I don't think there's any answer to the right way to do it.
No, if someone's got the answer, I'd like to hear it. I mean, I think my kids and like a lot of things in retrospect would say, I was surprised you were able to like make dinner. But for me, that was relaxing. It's like, I make food. It turns out well. I follow a recipe. I feel a sense of accomplishment, and it only took 20 minutes.
It sounds like you and I both were the experts of the 20-minute dinner.
Had to be.
Oh, yeah. But dinner was always an important family time. We had, until my older daughter was busy in the early evening, that was ritual.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I agree with you. That sort of ritual, and maybe that's something, right? Like you knew there was going to be a touch point. And maybe that helped balance that you didn't show up for the poetry reading that day or something, though they certainly could get me with guilt around that. But,
yeah. Still, no.
Sure. But I think having that touch point, that time when you're together, finding that time. And it was me, again, I grew up in a Greek household where dinner was sort of sacrosanct. So, yeah, I agree.
I'm gonna get some of your 20-minute Greek recipes.
Trust me, those take all day. That's a Saturday job.
That's what I was thinking of. The spanakopita, the moussaka, where you're making your own bechamel. Oh my gosh,
that's a weekend job.
Okay, so our program's about finding your next. I'd like to ask you, what is your next?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I was just talking to my colleague, Dawn Abbott, who's the head of our cath lab and is going to be the next SJL president. And she said, oh my gosh, I hope nobody asked me that because maybe I'm going to be on a boat. They like to sail. So
there you go. That's not a bad next.
It's true. I have thought about it. I think, 4 or 5 years ago, I've had this feeling like I should do the next thing. Looked at chief and chair jobs, looked at other types of things that seemed like the next logical step up the ladder, and I didn't do them. And I think that was as powerful to me as doing things because I hadn't really said no, and sort of if the next ladder was there, would always take it, enjoyed it. And now I feel like I'm in a place where I don't have to take that next step. And I don't know if it's proving something to me or somebody else, for sure. If it's interesting, or I've done interim things because I love our new CEO. But I don't know that I want another, unless something comes along that's exciting, that could lead me that way. So I'm pretty open to that. But I'm not sure I want another step up the ladder. I love what I'm doing. Maybe I'll do something very different. Some medicine, maybe it's something adjacent, but I don't know that I have a next except spending more time with family. I have a granddaughter now, so that's fun. And my kids are far away at times, so.
Yeah. I love that, Athena. I share some of those feelings that okay, we've kind of done some wonderful things, and life is good.
It is. I feel lucky too. Sometimes it's a sense of feeling like I got lucky, right? Anyway.
You worked hard to get lucky.
Maybe.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with these mid-career women?
I would say to not. It feels daunting, I think, in the middle. I think that was a daunting time because there's all this excitement at the beginning, and then there's all this self-reflection now. Maybe at the end, I don't know what the end is. Maybe I'm not at the end, but it can feel a little stagnant that you're doing the same thing for the last 10 years. And even finding one or two things, and not a total plug, but a total plug for ACC or ASC or AHA or other places where I did things, to do something outside of your institution or do something locally that's new or different where you're contributing in a new way. I think that's how I end up getting involved in ACC, is to, you can feel stagnant, I think, but there's ways without upending everything and moving somewhere else, to find new and exciting things, whether it's taking on something new in the job you're doing, or your private life. Maybe you take up gardening or Greek cooking. But I think I recognized, and I was never a very personally reflective person very well, but that those sort of external things I think helped.
Well, I can't tell you how honored I feel that you shared your thoughts and leadership path and just your friendship today. Thank you, Athena, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sandy. You've been a great friend over the years and a great leader. So thrilled to be here. It's great.
Back at you.